So I did make this top a couple of months back, but it's gotten so tight. So we're going to remake it, but bigger, better and reversible. So we have our pattern paper and we're folding it in half, and then we are taking a top that we want to mimic and we're going to trace that. So yes, I know at the moment it looks like I'm using an identical top to make another top. That's not what we're doing really. I just kind of want the tank top shape at the top, if that makes sense. As you can see, the difference that I'm going to make is I'm tracing around this top, but I'm going to draw from the armpit down a straight line instead of that slanted line that was there before. I'm doing that to make sure the top has more of a boxy look and that it has more room as well, especially because the initial top was just a bit too tight. So yeah, I'm going in, I'm connecting those dots that we've made, I'm making it neat, and then I'm going to add my 1/2 inch seam allowance as well. Once I've done that, I'm going to grab my scissors and cut out that top. Bear in mind we've cut it on fold, so as we unfold it, we'll be able to see the full top. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure down from my upper bust point, so from not my upper bust point, sorry, from my shoulder down to my waist, and I'm going to mark that on one side. And then what I'm going to do is use that point and connect it to the bottom of the other side of the top, and that is going to give it that slanted look. And then to that measurement, I'm just going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to cut that strip as well. So in a normal world, we just cut out 2 of these pieces, one on the front side, one on the back side, but because we are cutting out or making this top reversible, we're going to cut out 4 pieces total. So that is 2 pieces on the right side and then 2 pieces on the wrong side. So I'm just grabbing my pattern paper, I'm laying it on top of my fabric, and I'm using my chalk to trace around those markings, and then I'm just going to go ahead and cut that out. And again, I'm repeating that 4 times total. 2 pieces that are going to be facing on or cut out on the front side, and 2 pieces that are going to be cut out on the wrong side of the fabric. Now we have our 4 pieces. We're going to take 2 of the pieces, so that is one piece that was cut right side up and the other one that was cut wrong side up, and we're going to fold that in half, and then we're going to take our pattern piece again, or pattern paper, and we're just going to trace up the front neckline onto the fabric directly, and then we're going to cut that out. Bear in mind you want to mark and cut the neckline where the seam allowance is included, so yeah, just bear that in mind when you are cutting that out. And then we can open up our fabric or our pieces, and as you can see at the moment we have our front pieces that are connected or joined, placed on top of each other, and we're going to start pinning this together. So what we are pinning and sewing is the armpits, as you can see, as well as the neckline. So our front pieces, we're pinning them together, armpit, neckline and the other armpit, and then we're going to do the same for the 2 back pieces that we have as well. Once you've pinned it, we're going to take it to our sewing machine and we're just going to stitch along all of those lines. I'm using an overcast stitch. Granted, you can use a zigzag stitch or an overlocker if you have that instead. So I've used a 1/4 inch seam allowance for this top. What I've done is, for most of these stitches I've made, is I've just gone back in and cut off the excess fabric, and that is really going to help in this tutorial just because it's going to help make sure the top is flat. So yeah, we're just going to go ahead and trim off the excess. I'm taking one side and I'm going to turn it inside out, as you can see here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the side that is inside out inside of the other piece that is wrong side out, and then at the top, so the shoulders there, we're going to join those up and pin all the way around it. So we're pinning around the circle, we are not pinning through all the layers, we're just pinning through the circle, and then we're going to stitch that circle as well. So just before we stitch that, I'm also going to pin the sides just to make our lives easier. So to do that, what I'm doing is I'm finding the side seam of our top. So that is after the armpit point. As you can see, the side seam, or the point at the just after the armpit, I'm pinning that together, and then I'm pinning two pieces, or the pieces that naturally kind of line up, and pinning those together. And then for the other side, I'm also going to do the same. So instead of it looking like the top is forming fully, it's kind of going to look like there's a very kind of open gap, if that makes sense, once we have pinned this. But that is what we want, because when we do stitch this and flip it round, it will look like the top is coming together. Now we're just going to stitch along the lines that I'm pointing to here, and then we can move on to the next step. So unfortunately I made a mistake, so instead of stitching half the way down on the side with the slant, I stitched all the way down. But what I should do is stitch down to the waist, or the length of my shoulder to my waist. So I've just seam ripped to make sure that that is the case, and that there is kind of like an open flap there. Once we've done that, we want to stitch the flap so it's no longer an open seam or raw edge. So I'm flipping my top inside out as much as possible, and I'm laying it like this, as you can see. So I'm pinning these points together, as you can see on the screen. I've labelled it just to make sure it's a bit easier to kind of follow, just because it's kind of hard to explain without it. And then I did lose some footage as well. So we are pinning along those lines, and then this is what it should look like. And we're going to stitch just along those pinned lines with our overcast stitch. And once we've done that, this is what the top should be looking like. As you can see, the open gap, or the flap, is still there, but the raw edges have been stitched. At this point, the top is actually almost done, but I decided that I wanted to add darts, just because you can see there's a bit of gaping. So to do that, I'm grabbing my chalk, and I'm seeing where the kind of the flap is that I kind of want to close. This is not the ideal way to do darts, by the way, but I'm just pinching it and marking one where I want the dart to start, where I want the dart to end. So there should be 3 points that I'm marking, just to gauge where that kind of triangle or dart is actually going to be. And then I'm just kind of looking at what it would look like once it's stitched, and once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take it off and pin it. So you guys saw me mark the front of the top in terms of where we want the dart to sit. I'm just using my finger as a point to gauge where I want that to sit on the other side of the fabric as well. And then, because we are going to stitch this dart from the inside of the top, I'm just pinching it with my fingers, and then I'm going to use my pins and my chalk to mark exactly where I want that dart to sit, and I'm just going to pin along those lines. So in the end, it should kind of look like a weird dart, or like a triangle like this, and we're going to stitch along those lines, and then we're going to reciprocate that for the other side. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can try on the top again and do it that way, or what I ended up doing is marking my dart in terms of how long it was, so like how far it came in from the armpit to like close to my nipple area, and then I kind of gauge, okay, that's how long the dart needs to be. I also measured from the inside of the top how long or how wide the dart is, and then I used that to gauge, okay, this is how wide the dart needs to be. And then to gauge exactly where the dart was going to sit, what I did is lined up my armpits of the top, and then that kind of helped me gauge where the dart was going to start. And then from that point, I could measure up the width of the dart, and then that told me how long, or how wide the dart was going to be rather. And then granted, I used the length of the dart to gauge the length that the dart needed to be, and that kind of gave me the diameters the measurements that I needed to make that dart identical on the other side. So now that we have those measurements and we've made those dart markings. I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing in terms of pinning where the dart, how deep the dart is going to be, where it's going to start and where it's going to end. And then we're going to stitch that line as well. Granted, try it on to make sure that it fits the way that you want it to. If you need to adjust, you can adjust, and then we should be good to go. So this is what the dart looked like after. I will admit, like, one side of the dart, like the first dart, came out perfectly. The second dart, for the front, it looks perfect, but for the inside where I stitched it as well, it just looks a bit weird. Afterwards, I did adjust it, so in the final reveal you will see the adjusted kind of look. But yeah, definitely go in, make adjustments to make sure that it is identical and looks the way you want it to. And just like that, we've reached our final step, which is hemming. Before you do hem, make sure you press your seams flat to make sure the top is looking the way you want it to. So what are we doing for this enclosed hem? We are folding it up 1/2 inch on both sides, and we're pinning it together so that the hem itself is kind of going to be hidden. So I'm starting from the shorter side of the top, and I'm pinning that first, and then I'm going to pin it down along the length of the top, and then again I'm going to do that on the other side. Pressing the top beforehand is what is going to make sure that when you are doing this step, that the top is actually flat and there's no like bulging areas or inconsistencies. So yeah, make sure you don't skip the ironing or pressing step before you do this. So instead of doing an overcast stitch or a zigzag stitch, I'm going to do a straight stitch to do the hem. Granted, you can use a triple straight stitch or whatever stitch you prefer the look of for this final step. And this is what the top came out looking like. So much better than the first one in my opinion. Let me know what you think. And if you haven't seen it yet, make sure you check out the matching pants tutorial next. See you over there.